Hello and welcome to another episode of Liberating Minds Podcast. Today I'm with my friend and comrade Sungu Oyoo, who's written a beautiful poetry book, Abolish Everything. Sungu, pick it up, my friend.
Many thanks for inviting me to the Liberating Minds podcast. And maybe just as we begin the conversation, I'll read one poem and then we can delve further into the conversation. And the poem that I wanted to read from this collection of poetry titled Abolish Everything is titled Where Were You? And it says, where were you when the volcanoes erupted, forming beautiful lands and rich soils that multinationals crave for? Where were you when at Wagala they lined people on the airstrip, shot and maimed them, and made them speak of that chapter in hushed tones? What is justice without truth? Where were you when they conspired to grab Karura and women stood firm, their connection to Mother Earth unshakable, bold African women on the front lines? Where were you when teachers demanded dignified wages and boycotted teaching, when roads became bribe collection centers and ultimate death traps, all those lives lost, all these children orphaned? Where were you when the youth, the majority disenfranchised, were denied a future, when they moved by night and got shot by daybreak? Africa weeps. Where were you when it was time to speak for the stifled, those whose voices were muffled? You impersonated the blind and pretended not to see. We see that which you saw. Where were you when in 2010 we voted in a new constitution? We, the people, demanded justice and freedom. Those demands exist today.
Amazing. You're a brilliant poet.
Thank you.
That is amazing, an amazing poem that is asking, where were you? Centering the struggle on the individual, that there's no messiah, there's no outside of yourself. It is you as the person. So you're going to explain to us why you chose this particular poem to start us off from the book, and tell us your thought process as you were writing this poem.
I chose to read this particular poem because it poses questions to the individual. And in as much as our organizing is collective, that collective, whether it's within an organization or a movement, is largely made up of individuals. And so the individuals contribute to collective efforts that then become the organizing that the collective is engaged in. And the poem just speaks to different things and different phases of Kenya's history, whether it's the land question and that the multinationals and a small elite of people have dispossessed the Kenyan people from, whether it's massacres that have happened in this country, like the Wagala massacre, and even subsequent cycles of violence that have largely been instigated by the ruling class in Kenya, whether it's the rights of workers and the teachers demanding dignified wages, whether it's young people trying to eke up a living and trying to secure a better future for themselves, and whether it's our collective demands as a society, because it mentions the 2010 constitution, which we know did not emerge out of a vacuum. It emerged out of the struggle that people in Kenyan society had immersed themselves in over a long period of time. And it's just to say, in asking the question, where were you? It's to show that, yes, as these processes were happening, there's people who are there who are immersed in those processes, but that for the processes to be more effective and more impactful, then everyone in society needs to be part of this progressing processes in society.
Absolutely agree, because these are our struggles. Karura Forest is our forest as the Kenyan people. I also see that you have centered women and youth in this poem. When you ask, where were you when the youth, the majority disenfranchised, were denied a future, when they moved by night and got shot by daybreak? Africa weeps. which is going to launch us into the next poem we are going to discuss. I just want to say that today we are celebrating our poet, Michelle Mogo, who's up there. She's a great African poet, and we lost her 2 years ago. And today, as we do poetry, we remember her and the role she played in the struggle. And also here you say, where were you when they conspired to grab Karura and women stood firm, their connection to Mother Nature unshakable, fooled African women on the front lines, which reminds us of the recent struggle we have had here in Kenya, where the women have come out in great numbers to defend the sovereignty of the Kenyan people. So thank you for breaking patriarchal notions and celebrating the women, African women on the front line.
Asante. Organize,
educate,
liberate,
celebrate. Asante Songo. Abolish Everything is the title of your book, A Poetic Manifesto from last evening. This for me is a very beautiful title. Maybe someone would think, how can we abolish everything? How do we live when we abolish everything? What does that look like? So what did you mean by Abolish Everything as a title for your book?
Like I mentioned at the beginning, most of the poems in the book speak to our material reality in society, the experiences we go through as Kenyan society, and by extension as Africans, and even by further extension as oppressed people across the world. And in saying, because the book is basically situated in Kenya, but it speaks to many other struggles. In saying abolish everything, it's because the book itself is looking at where Kenya is situated. And we know that Kenya is a neo-colonial state. The neo-colonial state is created in the image of the colonial state. And you cannot reform a colonial system. You need to abolish it and build a new system in its place, a system that guarantees dignity of people, a system that guarantees peace, that guarantees justice, that guarantees dignity. Because if you look at the neo-colonial system today, it every day only humiliates our people. It condemns them to poverty, it condemns them to suffering, it condemns them to exploitation. And you cannot say that you want to reform exploitation. You abolish it and create that new society that you want.
That is amazing, because that speaks to our realities in absoluteness. And I think the reform agenda has been slowing down the progress of realizing a new society where we actually get social justice, we actually get food, we actually have dignity, we actually get housing, we actually have healthcare. Because not just in Kenya, but majority of our people across the continent are grappling with these very same realities. So I'm with you on abolishing everything and birthing a new alternative society, alternative way of doing things, because it is absolutely clear that the current state system has failed. It is not working for the people.
It has failed massively.
Including the justice system. Have you ever seen the justice system working? Everything is not working for us. So I think it is about time we start discussing and imagining what a new Kenya would look like, what a new Africa would
Or maybe it's working perfectly. Because you said nothing is working for us. But maybe the system was not created to work for us. And so that is why it is working as it was intended to work, and it is serving those it was intended to serve. And so...
Okay, yeah, you're very right on that. I think now when we reason like that, we see it that way, because this is not our system to begin with in the first place. So it cannot work for us if it is not for us. For whom it was intended for, it is perfect motion. That they have our leaders puppeteering, perfect. They can exploit our minerals and resources and keep us disenfranchised and poor. It is working. But for us, are we still going to be like, we need some reforms here? The way they're exploiting our minerals, they need to exploit us in a more humane way.
Like a more... Well, the way they're doing extrajudicial killing.
They need to stop. No, abolish.
You have to abolish everything.
Abolish everything. So actually, this is amazing. Abolish police system. Can we go to that poem? Really
Abolish
quick?
everything. Sure.
For me, I think this was my best poem in the book. I read the book and I was just like, I really love Abolish. I love Abolish and Songs of Struggle, which we're going to get to shortly.
Okay. Abolish hunger. Abolish student loans. Abolish the curriculum. Abolish water bills. Abolish the thieving cellular company. Abolish everything.
Or better yet, abolish injustice. Abolish the police. Abolish the system and its prisons. Abolish everything.
Dismantle patriarchy. Dismantle capitalism. Dismantle imperialism. Dismantle the system and its prisons. Dismantle everything.
But abolition is creation. To destroy hate is to create love. To dismantle impunity is to create justice. To abolish war is to create peace. To unlearn individualism is to create community. To tear down the old order is to build the new.
Hasten decolonization, nurture organization, create dignity, create equality, and whilst creating Utu, abolish everything.
This poem sums up so beautifully and so perfectly. I really love that it is about centering Utu, Ubuntu philosophy, which is about?
Ubuntu basically is an African philosophy which recognizes our interdependence as human beings. Beyond that, Utu brings out our humanity as a people. And so Michere Gidai Mugo, the late professor, was one of the proponents of Utu. So basically, it talks to us being humane and recognizing other human beings for what they are as human beings, not as beings to be exploited, not as vessels that can be oppressed in one way or the other, but just to recognize them as human beings.
That I am because you are, and because you are, I am. And Michere was a big champion of Utu. She lived it, she practiced it, and she was advocating for everyone to embrace Utu. That you see a person, we are each other. I am you and you're me in its literal sense. That the way you feel about being treated badly is the way every other person feels about being exploited. The way you feel about oppression, the way you feel. Let's create a new society where being human is respected, is, it's Utu. I am because you are. The way maybe we love on our brothers and sisters, that we see everybody for being our brothers and sisters. The way we love our moms, that we see every other woman as our mother. The way we love our dads, we see every other man as our dads. And for the parents to see every other child as their children. This was our African culture, but because of capitalism, we have been taught individualism. We have been conditioned to think about me, myself, and I, which is now the thing we're trying to unlearn, even with poems such as Abolish Everything. When we say abolish the curriculum, the education system is really not for us again, the conversation where we had that the system is working perfectly for them, but not for us. I remember when we were going to school, I could not speak my mother tongue. I was punished heavily, severely, ashamed even for speaking mother tongue. Yet, this is our country. We are at home, but we have to be conditioned to speak the colonizers' English. And it does not seem ridiculous to the teachers who are doing this. When we say abolish the police system, abolish the system and its prisons, it's because it is our people who populate those prisons. It is our people who could be easily reformed by some guidance. In Mathare, we are having the ecological justice system. For the longest time, Mathare has experienced extrajudicial killings. And we, as human rights defenders, as social justice activists from MSJC, we would tell the youth, reform from crime, because we do not want to keep documenting cases of police killings. And they would ask us, fine, I'll stop stealing, but what am I going to do? I need to eat. I need to survive. So after the demolitions happened, we're encouraging the youth groups to plant trees, to plant vegetables, to start community gardens. And from this, they are able to earn an income. So they have completely reformed from crime to now earning a living through urban farming. And it was very clear to everybody that they just needed a little guidance. It's not that they are criminals as society sees them, as they have been made to become. And they're so hardworking. They love the gardening. They love that they can be able to depend on themselves without endangering their lives. And the killer cops come and they're like, yo, who are we gonna kill now?
I think you've mentioned two really important things.
Yeah.
The first being abolishing the prisons, the system and its prisons.
Yeah.
And I think we have to think of it both in terms of physical prisons.
Yeah.
And for example, industrial area committee and all these prisons in society, but also the many other prisons that exist within society. For example, lack of healthcare in itself is a form of prison because if one person in the family cannot access healthcare, for example, now with the reform of the health system and this new shift which doesn't work at all, then the whole family is held captive at a psychological level because they are worried about the well-being of this individual who cannot access healthcare.
Yeah.
If you are in poverty, you are living in poverty and you are unable to, for example, provide for your children, that is an economic prison. And so there is so many prisons inside of society.
Wow.
And the system is constantly boxing us into these small corners, which it then uses to contain us and to put us on survival mode such that we cannot think of organizing or have time to organize.
Yeah.
And secondly, the education system, which you mentioned, in itself is a prison in the sense that the colonial education system was to produce bureaucrats for the colonial administration. It was to produce clergy for the church. It was not meant to produce, for example, thinkers for African society. And so, like when you mentioned language, you see how then that education system stifles language. And it then becomes the prison of culture and the prison of human existence, because we know that culture is at the heart of our existence and is at the heart of the evolution of society. And so there's many small pockets of prisons all around us. And a lot of times it's even possible that we ourselves are already imprisoned within these prisons, but we cannot see them because we conceptualize a prison as a physical facility which has high walls and cells and we are contained in it. But the capitalist system has also figured out many ways of keeping us inside prisons while creating the illusion that we are free and that we live in a free society.
Wow. I think that is brilliant. I can only imagine how many African youths are in the prison of unemployment. Because you gotta think every day where to get money to survive, because this is our money system.
That's one of the biggest prisons.
I know, right? How are we expected to survive in this system? So we are pushing for collective, communal, community-centered initiatives and actions to get out of this system that is not ours, that was not meant for us, that will never ever work for us. And on that note, I think we introduced the poem titled Songs of Struggle, which is about the Pan-African struggle, really. Sungu.
This morning, how I wished that Lumumba lived to see Congo today, all the war, that Hani lived to see South Africa today. Were all those years in exile worth it? That Cabral lived to see Guinea today. Where are our Pan-Africana liberated zones? That Kimathi lived to see Kenya today. 50 billionaires and 50 million beggars. That Fanon peeped at Algeria today. Africa weeps. That Nkrumah was reborn today. Who insists that Africa must unite now more than ever. That the leopard could look in the mirror today. Has he become the ogre he fought pre-86? That you met yourself 20 years from now. Would you recognize that human today? Struggle, like society, is in continuum. Progress made, then reverse gear engaged. Watch out for the counter-revolutionaries.
Child. This poem is talking about the struggle of Congo, the struggle of South Africa, the struggle of Guinea, and the struggle of Kenya and Algeria, the African struggle, really. What was going through your head as you wrote this very beautiful and important poem?
It was just to echo Nkrumah's message at the independence of Ghana. That the independence of Ghana, you remember Nkrumah said that the independence of Ghana was meaningless without the total liberation of Africa. And beyond liberation, then we can then move to the unity of Africa. And I think for me...
that African states would be pawns for imperialism chessboard.
Yes.
Nkrumah said that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the only way to avoid being pawns on the imperialist chessboards was for the African countries to all come together and unite. And yes, a program, 10-point program for African unity with common currency, common military, common central bank, But I think generally the poem arose out of a point of reflection. For example, we see the sacrifices made by those who came before us.
Yeah.
Those on whose shoulders we stand. But we, at the same time, we also know we stand not just on the shoulders of those who came before us, but also on their graves. Because a lot of them paid the ultimate sacrifice. And so we see people like Lumumba and Hani and Cabral who paid the ultimate sacrifice. If they were to come back to life and look at these societies, the society we live in, is it what they fought for? Does it maintain their ideals and the principles that they held so dear in their organizing? I remember when we started the conversation, you mentioned the urban farming that's happening in Mathare by the riverbank, and how young people are now producing their own food and living a life of crime. I think that is a liberated territory, a liberated zone, like Cabral would have said, in the sense that within the whole urban terrain, which is exploitative and which only extracts and exploits those who live within it, these young people have control, at least at the moment, of the land around which they live. They are able to farm it, produce their own food, have places where they can create their shelters. And I think it's really important for society to be aware of such progressive things happening in society, whether it's the establishment of communes or people's settlements, because these things also arise out of a failure of the system to provide basic rights like housing, like water, like electricity, like food.
Yeah.
And we now see the assault that is happening on food, on the triple assault on food. There was the proposed seed law. Actually, it's in court. There is this recent one which needs farmers to get licenses and whatnot. It's
ridiculous.
It's like 10 kilograms of nonsense. It's a load of nonsense. Then there is the one which sought to change the nature of land ownership from freehold to leasehold, because people would it would change the classification, and which would have dispossessed a lot of people, especially small scale and peasant farmers. And so we can see that the system is on a continuous assault against the people, and the little that the people have been left with, it is still trying to take and take. All it does is to take and take. And so it's important for us to create these examples of liberated territories where people can see examples of people struggling and creating prefiguring society, or creating prefigurative examples of the kinds of societies we would want to live in the kinds of ideals we would want to govern those societies. You know, we've been in the political processes over the last few months with the protests and everything. Just to speak on this last chapter. And I think Kenya has changed in a fundamental way. Kenya will never be the same again since June 25th.
I agree with you.
But at the same time, a lot of people, a lot of individuals and organizations were part of this struggle. And it is now is that moment where this last paragraph becomes really pertinent. In that struggle like society is always in continuum. Progress is made and then reverse gear is engaged. And through this process, we've seen a lot of counter-revolutionary elements who initially existed within the ranks of the movements, people who have betrayed the cause, people who have decided to seek their own selfish interests, whether political or economic. And so I think struggle is the best teacher. Practice is the best teacher. Like Bob Marley says, we'll know who are the true revolutionaries. And you can only know that by engaging in struggle. You cannot know that by sitting to discuss struggle.
By being eloquent on a podium.
No. It's by engaging in struggle.
Yeah.
And then as the struggle progresses, the wheat and the chaff go.
Yeah. But for me, I'm not so worried about the counter-revolutionaries because this struggle feels like it is so much in our hearts. The fact that it did not take so much to mobilize the people and everybody came out of their own volition and parents were supportive of their youth. These counter-revolutionaries are just one people. We are millions of us.
Actually, it reminded me of something Sankara said. He said, our revolution is not a speaking tournament.
It is not a speaking tournament. On to the next page. This line where I say that this morning, how I wish that Kimathi lived to see Kenya today, 50 billionaires and 50 million beggars. Man, this is such a sad reality for our country and the Kenya Land and Freedom Army who gave their lives really that generations of Kenyans after them do not have to live undignified lives. And that Kimathi lived to see Kenya today, 50 billionaires and 50 million beggars. I think these were the words of J.M. Kariuki. And we remember the likes of Pilgama Pinto and Bildad Kagia and even Wangari Mathare in recent years fighting for a society that respects the environment and the people, because she said they go hand in hand, governance and environment. But for me, they give us strength to keep the struggle going. And all those young people who took up arms to fight for this land did not do it in vain. And this is what even we're saying about the current Shujas that we lost during the recent protests, that it was not in vain. The struggle to liberate our country continues. The struggle to liberate the African continent continues. The war in Congo today is something we cannot overlook. We have sent many solidarity messages. We've held many solidarity events for Congo. And when we continue advancing the people's side, I'm sure we will be able to do more for Congo. For now, this is all we can do for Congo and Sudan and, of course, Palestine. Because the struggles of people everywhere are our struggles. So on to the next page of the poem where we say, today we celebrate the living dead.
Today we celebrate the living dead. Che, Sub-Commandante Marcos, Rodney, Kimpa Vita, Kimathi wa Washiori, Nzinga wa Ndongo, Kinjeketile wa Ngwale, Mekatilili wa Menza, Koitalel Arap Samoei, revolutionaries far and wide, all who never sold out. Tonight we eat cassava. Tonight we make loud. Tonight a young man grabs a pass, gets shot in the head by they who arrest dissidents and exile those they don't like. Tonight it will rain. Bloodstains wash off the pavement. Millet seeds sprout from under the soil. The Tana Delta will flood. More will lose their lives, but water has no enemy. Tonight we recall the conversations of yore, as told by our grandmothers. Them, strong African women, givers of life, warriors. Queen Zinga, Ya Asantewa, Mekatilili wa Menza, Winnie Mandela, Wangari Maathai, Ransom Kuti, Dora Shafik, Queen Madamo, Sojourner Truth. There are stories of how your people came here, how they crossed the oceans, waged war against us, kidnapped us, killed us, were resisted by us.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I think for me, the main is like now I've decided to read, then ask myself the question, then respond to my question. I just went straight into talking.
Yeah.
But I think for me, the crux of this part is just to remind African people that we have a history that precedes slavery and colonialism.
In Vasco da Gama.
Yes, and Vasco da Gama. Our history as African people does not start with Vasco da Gama.
Yeah.
We have existed on this planet for thousands of years, and we have built societies, we have built kingdoms, we have invented things, we have generated knowledge, we have seen cultures grow and decline. And so that those who came before us are bearers of knowledge. But also importantly, the poem speaks of the tales told to us by our grandmothers, these African women who have been part of struggles and who a lot of times are erased from the grand narrative of society. How do we then again make sure that at this moment in time that does not happen, that history is not rewritten to suit those who are writing it or to suit particular agenda in society, but beyond pointing to our history and our existence, which precedes slavery and colonialism, it's also just to show that we have always resisted that which has not worked for us. I mean, it's the dialectic of history. And many writers and many thinkers will tell you that repression breeds resistance.
Absolutely.
And so at particular points in history where society has felt repressed, there has always been resistance. You look at the East African coast, there was resistance against the Portuguese, against the Omani occupation, against the British, against many external forces which came and tried to assert themselves and control that particular territory. And it's not limited to the Kenyan coast. It's everywhere across the continent, everywhere.
Yeah.
Frelimo. Samora Machel
has come. I think you've said a beautiful point that for as long as there's oppression, there's always going to be resistance. Like, that is so obvious. And I wonder how these oppressors never learn. How is it that they cannot take a lesson from history? That you cannot oppress people, you cannot kill people, you cannot dictate over people. You will die. All these things are vanity, and the people are forever. They come and they go. They come and they go, but the people are forever. In fact, the new alternative system that we're talking about should center the people to dictate how they live, because it is they who are always there. You get? Years come and go, but the people remain. We read stories about, say, the recent dictator in Kenya was Moi. When he died, I remember my comrades and we went out and celebrated the death of Moi.
I also remember we had a party.
We had a party.
They were like, thank God.
I know our people in Eswatini cannot wait. Our people in Uganda cannot wait. And recently, Cameroonians are probably celebrating Paul Biya's demise. So this Ruto should take a lesson.
Nature dealt with beer. Nature, there must always be a balance in society.
Yeah.
And nature can outbalance you. The thing with forces of oppression is because of the way in which they are thinking and the system that guides them, the capitalist system, given how much it is framed around exploitation and domination, it almost creates a psychological disease among oppressors such that they think that they are invincible and that they can escape everything. That's why today you see, for example, corporations continuing to pollute and investing money into human beings going to space and space shuttles, because they think that when the earth becomes unlivable, they could go to probably Mars or somewhere, and it creates a psychological condition even among the oppressor themselves. But the good thing is that it's a condition they cannot survive.
Yeah, because they have biological limitations, but I think also sometimes, like, where is their logic? Like, can you reason a little bit?
Their logic is exploitation. That is the only logic behind their thinking.
I think it's
profit.
It's a backward logic. It's
definitely is.
It is an uncivilized logic. There's no civilization in talking and planning about exploitation.
I mean,
it's not sustainable.
I mean, the Western world, at least as I can see from recent history, is one of the most uncivilized parts of the world. Because, and I say so, because if we look at how much it doesn't respect human life, the wars that have been fought in Europe and other parts of the world, I think the basic marker of civilization is how much respect we give to the dignity and sanctity of human life. If we cannot respect life, we cannot claim we are civilized. If we cannot respect the planet, we
there's no civilization in that.
Civilized. And so civilization is more than just buildings, machines, and whatnot.
And preaching human rights.
And preaching human rights.
Yeah. The rest of the world, you're leaders, number one, by leaders. Let us complete this poem and then we do our final poem. Read my comrade.
Tonight we salute the peasants, the workers, main force of production, victims of capitalistic deduction, facing acute contradictions and planning their actions. Tonight we pluck the courage, start conversations that encourage, and bring our people within range. As the dispossessed converge, they salute history and create beautiful histories yet to come.
That's amazing.
Tonight we meet the ancestors at a Mwakenya meeting. Tonight we discuss our conditions and our children's future. These things weigh heavily on our hearts, like lives lost in the depths of the Congo and the depths of the Sahara. Worried ancestors watch over us from the depths of the Danakil. In Esbet El Hagana, in Kibera, in Haenicha, in Galiema, in Makoko, in Jamestown, the indignified gather. They historicize and problematize, politicize and strategize. Across the cities and villages, plains and valleys, their clarion call is fierce, unapologetically Pan-African. For silence is no longer constant. Whispers can be heard. They grow into a murmur and multiply into a din, grow louder and unite in beautiful songs of protest. These streams of defiance, speaking truth to power. These floods of revolt, shifting the balance of power, overturning the system, rearranging society. Some discover the simple complexity of action and the complex simplicity of talk without action. Others read the Arusha Declaration and dedicate energy to political education, to the creation of a new Africa, the rebirth of a dignified African. They revisit the archives, reshape twisted narratives, recraft the national question. They reorient productive forces, reaffirm their housing and dignity. They reclaim Africa. The truth becomes less scarce and people define their progress. Education stops being a commodity and healthcare becomes a given right. The forests are allowed to regenerate and water, that ever-present but ever-absent necessity, is availed to all. Communities build dikes along the Nyando and the Tana and the Ndoya. They recall the recent flood waters with resentment, but memories of their recent floods of revolt energize and fill them with hopeful thought. They build community schools as was previously done at Karinga, strengthen popular grassroots institutions, congregate in people's assemblies, tell stories of resistance that herald another dawn, the reassertion of freedom of conscience, the re-emergence of the organic intellectual. Teachers teach, fishermen fish, nurses nurse, farmers farm the rich volcanic soil, workers work under dignified conditions, and Africa clenches its fists, safeguarding its land, food, and freedom. Parents play their part, every day reminding the children of their histories and our collective desires as a people, reminding them that they are queens and kings of Africa, that Africa is the past and the future, that Africa belongs to them. The children will remember your narrations of the knowledge in Timbuktu. The children will remember your narrations of the iron industry in Meroe. The children will remember your narrations of the great ruins of Zimbabwe, the female combatants of Asante, the spear of Shaka. They will give and demand respect in equal measure. They will recall Tunisia demanding its freedom. They will recall Sudan resisting a tyranny, Togo demanding a sovereign currency, Benin demanding its sculptures, and Africans reminding the world that Black Lives Matter. And when they reveal their card, the errant natives will detect their range line. The Sahrawi will demand their phosphates. The Congolese will demand their coltan. Mauritania will consolidate a national consciousness. And the people will keep on asking political questions. In feminist networks, solidarity economies, labor unions, organic movements, people's committees, in our revolutionary councils. Many decades from then, we will look back and wonder whether it was worth it, whether it was revolution or the madness of our youth. With righteous nostalgia, we will recall the simple things we asked for at the start, those initial political questions. People's participation, economic emancipation, political liberation, socio-cultural transformation, environmental protection, a pan-African recalibration.
Oh my gosh, this is a beautiful poem.
Thank you.
Oh, amazing. Wow. In feminist networks, solidarity economies, labor unions, organic movements, people's committees, our revolutionary councils. This is the alternative that we are talking about after we abolish.
Yes.
People's participation, economic emancipation, political liberation, social cultural transformation. This is very deep. Environmental protection and a Pan-African recalibration, because we realize that the Kenyan struggle is a Pan-African struggle. That the liberation of Kenya is incomplete without the liberation of our neighbors in Uganda and Tanzania and Congo and Sudan and Zimbabwe and everywhere else in the continent. Like the ideas that Sankara and Nkrumah, Cabral, Fanon had in those days, we are looking forward to being the generation that actually realizes them. And I like here that he said, whether it was revolution or the madness of our youth, I don't know who said that to achieve any meaningful change, you have got to be mad.
I think it's Sankara. That you need a certain
Some level of madness.
And he said it's only madness that has ever changed the world, because if you conform to what the system wants you to be and what society expects you to be, then you're also more likely to conform to the various forms of oppression in that society. You have to break out in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, we recall the simple things we asked for at the start. They're simple things because they're basic things.
I mean, our people are not asking for anything complex. Our people are not even saying that we want to go to holiday in the Bahamas. No, they're saying we want drinking water. Our people are not saying we want everyone to have 10 Bitcoin. No, they're saying we want housing, dignified housing.
Yeah.
Our people are not saying everyone wants to have an airplane. No, they're saying we want education. Our people are asking for very simple things, the basic necessities of life, which can enable you to live, to have a dignified existence. And I think it is time we revisit history, and I think you mentioned it. And the poem mentions it somewhere with the Arusha Declaration, which was the economic program of Tanzania from 1967 when Nyerere and TANU wrote the Arusha Declaration. But I think it is important that we look at the Pan-African struggle, because you mentioned the independence of Kenya, the freedom of Kenya, and how it is linked to the other countries. And I think when we look at the Pan-African Congresses, the 5th Pan-African Congress is of particular significance in that it was able to answer 3 fundamental questions. One, the first question was, who are our friends? The masses of our people. Who are our enemies? The colonial empire and the structures behind it. Imperialism, capitalism. 3, what must be done at this particular moment in time? You remember this is 1945. The Congress was held in Manchester. They said, organize the masses of our people using the mass-based parties as vehicles of national liberation. And so today then we have to answer the same questions. Who are our friends? It still is the masses of our people. Who are our enemies? Of course, it is that whole capitalist system, but we also have local agents of capitalism who are our political and economic elite, and who report to their masters across the ocean. Those are the enemies of the people. It must be done. We must continue to organize. We must build organization that is anchored on a clear analysis of society, on a concrete analysis of society, and which is ready to engage in struggle to create that new society which we desire. Because if these people cannot fulfill these simple demands that people are asking, housing, healthcare, what, then the people fulfill them. Either way, even the Kenyan Constitution, despite it being a bourgeois document, still begins by saying that all sovereign power belongs to the people. Belongs to the people. And if we are the sovereign, it then means that we should have the capacity to determine the course of history, to determine how we want to live in society and how we want society to move, whether we want to live lives of where we are constantly exploited, demeaned, and humiliated and killed, or whether we want lives of dignity and which accord us access to these basic needs that our people are asking for.
Completely agree. I think it was Lenin who said that in its struggle for power, the masses have only one weapon, which is the weapon of organizing. We can only organize for us to achieve any meaningful change. And this is why we are organizing in Mathare, bringing the youth groups together and occupying that land so we can bring a meaningful change of getting away from crime and being able to be self-sufficient. And we're hoping that, by the way, when time comes to show, because I know very, very few weeks to come when I'll be at loggerheads with the states over that land, because they want to come and bring affordable housing, which we know is a lie.
Organize.
Organize to take power for social justice. Yeah, so asante for reminding us that we can only organize. Organize in trade unions, organize in feminist networks, organize in communities, grassroots communities, organize everywhere, organize in church, wherever you are, organize. And in organizing, it's bringing the new ideology of this system is not working, will never work, so we have to work a new system and be together in it, walk the talk, walk pamoja. So we're going to do our last poem today. I hope you're enjoying the poetry from Abolish Everything. I hope you do plan on purchasing a copy of this very nice book. I love it. Abolish Everything, a Poetic Manifesto from last evening by the one and only Sungu Oyoo.
Thank you.
Is that you, Sungu Oyoo?
That is me in flesh. And actually, just to add to the last thing Wanjira said, you can find a copy of the book at Tukombozi Library. You can find a copy of the book at Cheche Bookstore in Lavington. You can find a copy of the book at Noria Bookshop in Nairobi CBD. You can find a copy of the book in Kisumu at Lolwe Bookshop. You can find a copy of the book in Garissa, the bookshop in town.
All right. Page 30, June 24. Let's talk about the Gen Z.
It's actually the last poem in the book. We inserted it as an addition. The book was already complete. But this work of poetry could definitely not come out without speaking of the struggle that intensified, especially in June 2024. And I'll read it. Or you want us to read it together?
We can read it together.
Okay.
Our Gen Zs, remember their names, martyrs of our struggle. We shall never forget.
Parliament buildings, remember that place. That's where the regime killed the peace. History shall never forget.
25th June 2024. Remember that date. The people birthed a new chapter. Kenya will never be the same again.
Remember October 1952 until freedom comes. Remember June 2024 until we are free. You know, this last paragraph, I actually really loved this poem. I think June 2024 marked a tipping point in the history of Kenya, in that the fear that the system had worked so hard to inculcate over the decades evaporated from the minds of the people, because the people realized that, and I'm really glad that you're the one doing this interview, because it's you who said that when we lose our fear,
they lose their power.
They lose their power. And when the people lost their fear, the system was crumbling and trembling and overwhelmed, and it couldn't handle the people.
Yeah.
And so for me, the thing is, good thing about seeing oppression for what it is that once you see oppression, you cannot unsee it. You can't say for 1 minute, this is oppression, and then you pretend, no, I've not seen it.
Yeah.
And so there was a qualitative leap in the national psyche in terms of how people viewed their oppression and how they viewed the systems responsible for their oppression. That is what, that time, from among the people, there were demands against the IMF, demands around the land question, demands around environment, the airport. People were able to, in a very intersectional way, link all these different forms of oppression and see the very system which is behind their oppression. And so at a qualitative level, society is at such a place where you find even that is why the lies of the regime do not sell nowadays. When they say something, they say, wamba. And you look at the number of strikes that have happened, university lecturers, doctors, nurses. Everyone is dissatisfied with the system. And I think they're trying to create a dumbed down society so that they can extend their rule. However, more importantly, the attempt to extend the term limits for elected representatives from 5 to 7 years is a sign of fear from the system. Because a lot of the representatives already know that they are not coming back. And so they are trying to extend their duration in power so they can accumulate as much as possible and retire on the wealth of society. But that way will not allow to happen. Because society itself will run them out of town. Yeah. They must be students of history, but even at the university, they are trying to make sure that history is not taught, that it is scrapped together with all these other humanities. They have not studied history and how societies across the world have reacted to such situations. But I think we must, as Kwame Ture says, at this moment in time, concentrate on organization and organization. We must organize the masses of our people. Garvey says, Marcus Garvey, we have a beautiful history, but we will create one that will astonish the world. How do we then create this new history that will astonish the world?
That is so sweet.
In our context, it is only through organization. It is only through organization and organizing in such a way that we are able to create those new societies in such a way that those counter-revolutionaries you mentioned do not hijack our struggles. Because even within the broader movements, there still is this push and pull between the revolutionary elements and counter-revolutionary elements. But the movement of history has always proven that at the end of the day, the revolutionary elements will prevail and the counter-revolutionaries will be thrown to the dustbins of history.
The people always win. And in conclusion, I'd like to finish with this poem from Mathare Kirema. I love Mathare Kirema's Field Marshal, and the song, Sefo Sang, CPK songs. I will just read the paragraph because I wanted to speak to our current situation in Kenya and the rest of Africa. We remember, and we will remember. Our history will re-emerge. The history will demand for land and freedom. Hashtag Mau Mau, hashtag land and freedom, hashtag land, food, and freedom. Thank you so much for being with us in this beautiful episode of Liberating Minds Podcast. We love poetry, and again, we urge you to purchase this book, Abolish Everything. You're going to love it, absolutely. A Poetic Manifesto from last evening by yours truly, Sungu Oyoo. See you on the next episode of Liberating Minds.
And thanks for inviting me to this interesting conversation.
We are so glad to have had you. It was fun.
Thank you. Thank you.